Hi, I'm Donna Kallner. This video on self-checks is part of Lesson 1 in the New Age Looping Basics e-course. In this unit, you'll practice reorienting your work after a break. We'll also take a closer look at the looping structure, and I want to give you some self-checks to perform as you learn looping. Let's start with reorientation. You may find that when you stop for more than a few minutes, you think you've forgotten everything you know about looping when you start again. That's pretty normal at first. When you're working with so much new, detailed information, your brain stores it temporarily in short-term memory. That area gets congested pretty quickly, though, so after about 45 minutes, your brain shifts all it can to long-term storage. It's still there, it's just in a different location. To access that information after it's moved to a new location, practice this. Put the needle in position for the next stitch, passing north to south under the lag on the next stitch in the previous row and poised over the working thread. But don't draw it through just yet. Put the piece down and take a short break. Fix yourself a cup of tea, take a walk, spend a few minutes doodling or folding laundry, whatever. In a few minutes, come back and pick up your work. Note how you left the needle poised in the middle of a stitch. Note how the needle is lower on the mold than the wrapped base cord because you've been stitching in a continuous spiral that builds from rim to base. Note how the last stitch made on the current row is on the side of your non-dominant hand. With your dominant hand, go ahead and draw the needle through to complete the stitch you began before your break. Completing this stitch will help trigger the rest of your memory, reminding you which direction to stitch. Remember, righties advance from left to right, lefties go right to left. You'll remember that the needle passes from north to south under the next lag on the previous row, and it always moves over the working thread. Pretty soon, you won't worry about getting started again after an interruption. You'll be ready to relax and really enjoy stitching. Let's talk about those self-checks now. One of the reasons I have students start on a mold is to present a clear visual field. I think being able to see the stitches clearly helps you understand the structure of this technique. Well, let's take a closer look at that structure. To do that, hold the piece you're working on with your arm fully extended in front of you. As you were stitching, you probably held the piece between 8 and 15 inches from the tip of your nose so you could see where to insert the needle. With the piece held at arm's length now, close your eyes, reopen them, and take a fresh look. Notice how the stitches align on the diagonal. That's because each stitch rests in the middle of a lag on the previous row. Shortly, you'll begin to design pieces made with the looping technique, so there's no better time than now to train your eye to see this characteristic. Slip the piece off the mold now. You've created a straight-sided sleeve of fabric. Put your fingers inside the sleeve and stretch that fabric to feel its elasticity. The live edge, the lags of the last row worked, should feel more stretchy than the wrapped base cord at the rim. Other factors also affect elasticity. Trapped tails reduce it. Large stitches with long lags between feel stretchier than small stitches with short lags. That brings us to some self-checks you can perform as you're learning this technique. These are things that I've seen enough students have trouble with over the years to think I should point them out as potential pitfalls. They're not mistakes, but they don't necessarily produce results that resemble the class samples. Not that there's anything holy about the class samples. Mostly, some of these can put a lot of stress on your hands, and they can make you second guess what you're doing. So let's take a look at them. The first one comes when you're stripping and goosing. You want to draw the thread toward the south, or close to it anyway. Then flick the stitch into place with your goosing finger. What you don't want to do is saw the thread back and forth between north and south or east and west. Sawing gives you very little control over the formation of the stitch. It can produce a stitch that's more like the knot you use to secure the wrapped base cord than the elastic structure we want at this point. Sawing gives you very little control over the allocation of thread for the lag as well, and it tends to distort the last stitch made and the row above it. Instead of sawing the thread, strip and goose. For now, please double check that your stitching advances from your non-dominant hand toward your dominant hand. If you're right-handed, you advance from left to right. If you're left-handed, you advance from right to left. Now that's not to say you'll never stitch the opposite direction, but for now, you want the advantage of being able to use your dominant hand for fine motor skills, manipulating the tension, controlling the working thread, goosing, and then use your non-dominant hand as a tension control tool. Also, please double check that you're stitching from the rim down in a continuous spiral around the mold. Now that's not to say you'll never orient your stitching differently, but at this point, an upside down and backwards grasp on the mold can be both disorienting and stressful on the hands. For now, the north to south, top to bottom, rim to base orientation puts gravity in your favor. See how the needle drops under the lag and over the working thread? I keep my elbow near my side as I strip the thread, pulling straight south or very nearly so. If it feels like you're fighting gravity or pulling away from your body, check how you're holding the mold. Teeny tiny stitches are a definite challenge to avoid at this stage of the class. More isn't necessarily better, especially when you're sampling this technique and need to be able to clearly see the structure of the fabric. If you can not distinguish your stitches from your lags, use fewer stitches. You can go back to teeny tiny stitches later on. Just how big should your stitches be? How long should your lags be? How many stitches per inch should you be making? That all depends. Everyone has their own stitching style, and materials certainly influence the gauge of your stitching. Here's my rule of thumb. If you like the way it looks, it's fine. Just make sure at this point you can distinguish between your stitches and your lags. Don't get hung up on the perfection of your stitches in this first sample. Your effort right now is better put toward the development of mindful thread control and to understanding the structure of this technique. Once you have that, changing the size or density of your stitches, that's just a minor adjustment. So work on your thread control in this sample. In the next video, I'll show you how to finish this sample pouch and suggest a sample project for lesson 1. I'll see you there.